to talk about this idea of like technically assessing a typeface because I feel like it's a mistake that I often see beginning designers make, right? There's this idea, and it's kind of true, right? That there's like a million free fonts on the internet. You can always go on like DaFont or Google Fonts or any number of either valid or somewhat sketchy websites and find just thousands upon thousands of fonts available for free download. There are about as many as there are stars in the sky. Just searching like free whatever font is going to get you hundreds and hundreds of results. But it is likely that you will learn after downloading and attempting to work with those kinds of fonts that you get what you pay for. This idea of like just being able to go out and find something that's really high quality for free. Sometimes you get lucky, but a lot of times you kind of end up with something that's a bit of a lemon, right? And it's kind of the same thing as like evaluating open source libraries in your development project. Sometimes there's like great free stuff out there that's being maintained by a team and that's been really thoughtfully done and that's being like consistently updated and like it's great, and that's something that you can put into your project and really benefit from. There are fonts that are the same way. However, there are also open source projects, right, that are just like a team of one, right? And it's something that somebody created just really for their own project or their own purpose, and they've shared it, which is cool, but it's not necessarily being constantly maintained, it's not being updated, it's not like it might not necessarily have everything you need, it might not be as well-rounded as you had hoped, and that's okay. Like that's part of putting things on the internet for free, right? You just you get to put it out there and it is what it is. And there's fonts that are the same way. So when you are looking at a font or a typeface or family that you want to add into your project, you need to kind of go through and evaluate it in the same way that you might think about evaluating a new library or a new dependency that you're adding to your application, right? Thinking about, what are my current needs? Will this grow with me to meet my future needs? Is this something that's going to be sustainable, that will stretch to include all of the various uses that one day I might need it to do? So that being said, I've kind of put together some guidelines that are worth keeping in mind. Before we dive far into that, I saw we had a few more people join the stream, and I wanted to kind of reiterate my, announcement from earlier. If you joined because you saw us share on Twitter that Carl was going to be on as a guest this morning, unfortunately he is not feeling well. I got an email from him this morning just saying he was under the weather, not really up for it. So he's going to take some time, rest and heal up, and then we're going to reschedule. So we will have him back on, or we will have him on, I suppose, for the first time. But if you tuned in to see Carl, unfortunately, that's not going to be the case today. Instead, I'm going to be talking about assessing typefaces for your project and kind of looking at the practical implications of the fonts that you choose. So that being said, I mentioned some guidelines to keep in mind when you're doing this kind of practical assessment of a font. The first I would say is to look at character set completeness. So a lot of times, again, with those free fonts, you might just see that they include the bare minimum. And that's like upper and lowercase English characters, maybe some like basic punctuation. Sometimes that means like just a period and an exclamation point and like nothing else, you know? But it's worth taking a look at whether that typeface actually includes that full set of numerical and punctuation characters, special characters, possibly like international non-English characters. And a lot of times when we look at these, we kind of start thinking like, it's okay, it doesn't need to be like 100% complete, right? I just want to use this for my headers, or I just want to use this for like some quick like call outs, you know? It doesn't need to be, it's not going to be my body text, so it doesn't need to be 100% complete. However, as a developer, I am sure that you have encountered scope creep before, and the same thing will happen with your fonts, like almost without a doubt. What is meant to be like just your H1 headers suddenly becomes something that you want to like add in a little bit here or there to like start connecting everything together in your design, and then you want to use it on this page and it would be really great as like a pull quote thing, and all of a sudden you are kind of in this awkward position where you've committed to a font in your design that no longer really meets the needs that you have. Ideally, it's best to choose a typeface that's going to be really well-rounded and really full-featured from the get-go, rather than having to kind of retrospectively try and work around the limitations of an incomplete typeface, especially once you've like published that design and it's part of the brand look and feel. That can be really hard to like walk back. It's annoying enough when it happens and you're just in the design phase and you have to go back and like change a whole bunch of stuff privately, you know, in your own Figma files. But once you've hit that publish button and it's out there, or it's in a style guide, or you've like start hiring freelancers, all of that is just going to get significantly harder and harder to walk back, right? Again, in that same way that if you have a dependency like a JavaScript library or something that you're using and you get really embedded in it, you're like, oh, this is the library that we're using for whatever, grids or animations, and then all of a sudden there's one really important thing that it doesn't do that you need, then you're in this position of like, well, do I change what my project is doing, or do I have to find a whole new library and then go back and replace it, or do I now have two libraries that are doing almost the same thing? I have done the same thing with fonts about a million times, where it's like, do I try and find something that looks kind of close, like a dupe, or do I have to like add a whole another typeface that's doing mostly the same thing into my style guide, or do I go back and I swap everything out? Like, it's not fun. First and foremost, it's not enjoyable. So the more you can do to kind of do these checks ahead of time and try to be really thinking about what you might need in the future, about ways that this might grow with you, that's going to put you in the best possible position. Another one of those things that thought of like having a font that can grow with you is the idea of making sure that you're checking for non-English or non-native language character availability. So I'm going to be saying English because English is often the language that I am designing in as the kind of default language. But this is really the case no matter what language you're kind of starting with. Internationalization is hard. Just straight up, if you've ever done it, you know that it is challenging, right? And especially from a design perspective, there's a lot that changes with internationalization in terms of your layout and the way that your type flows. All of that is compounded if you're switching from like a right to left to a left to right or vice versa. It can really have a huge impact on your design, right? Like, obviously. That gets even harder if you have to start swapping out your fonts. Ideally, you'll be able to choose a single typeface or a single type family that will translate really well across all of your languages. This is common and very achievable, especially if you are using kind of exclusively Roman alphabet languages, right? If you're talking, Spanish, English, Italian, German, Dutch, all of those basically use the same set of characters with just a few kind of special characters, right? So as long as you have a typeface that includes or can accommodate that handful of special characters, then you're in a really strong position, right? That means you don't have to go through and change that part of your design every time the language is changed. This is possible, although admittedly more difficult when it comes to those non-Roman language typefaces, right? Looking at things like Chinese, Japanese, Russian, Hebrew, Korean. There are some very popular free options that are out there. I think especially on Google Fonts, Noto Sans, Noto Serif, Open Sans, those are super well thought out, super complete, free typefaces that have different character sets that all use the same kind of design principles. So it's going to look very similar, right, when you pull them up. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new window. so that we can take a look at how something like that would look. One of my Google fonts. There we go. So let's take a look at Open Sans. Right, and there's a list here, right, of languages that you can filter through. And we'll see what this is. Right, so Open Sans adjusts. Oh, maybe not that one. We'll see how many versions of Open Sans there is, right? So there's Greek, right? We saw Hebrew, not Japanese. I'm just trying languages at this point, to be honest with you. But we saw it kind of adjust through a few different languages, right? And that gives you, here's a great example, right? We can see that the style here carries over. So even though we're swapping between like very, very different character sets, the look and feel of those characters stays the same, right? This is obviously like super ideal to be able to just choose one typeface, one type family, really like this Open Sans, and be able to swap between Russian or Greek or Hebrew or, as I believe looks like French, English, right? Like all your Roman languages for sure. That's gonna make your life so much easier. Yeah, and I believe the other one that does that is Noto. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. That's gonna make your design feel a lot more coherent if you are in a situation where you have to accommodate a whole bunch of different languages. If your internationalization is going to be incredibly broad, right? And in some ways it does limit your selection to have to choose from these typefaces, but I would say, especially for something like your primary font, your body copy, I would go with something like this. That's going to let you move smoothly back and forth between them and it's like keep that kind of parity no matter what language someone is viewing your site in. And right, this is kind of where that like anatomy of a character knowledge comes into play that we talked about, I believe, a week or two ago. Yeah, because when you can pinpoint those kind of main identifying characteristics of a typeface, then you're in a really good position to be able to find other typefaces that will match closely. So even if something like this isn't available, right, like Noto is pretty powerful, that's great. But I don't know off the top of my head of anything else that's going to have quite this level of like variety and flexibility. So a lot of the time you are going to end up in a position where you have to choose another family, choose another font that is going to look similar enough that it's not going to disrupt your design, right? In terms of like width of characters and spacing and kind of height, right? Because you don't want to be in a position where not only do you have to change the font, but now you also have to adjust to like sizing and spacing and leading and like all of that, right? Ideally, you don't want to change anything. If you must, then you want to just change the font and be able to leave the rest of your kind of typesetting styles intact. So being able to choose another typeface that is going to match pretty closely in terms of, you know, width, height, weight, all of that, that's going to put you in a really good position. More often, you're probably going to use that skill outside of internationalization to try and find like typefaces that provide interesting contrasts and like make your design as interesting as possible. But this is a very specific situation that does come up, right? Like I've had to handle quite a bit of internationalization projects. And having that ability to kind of look at a typeface and break it down is going to be super helpful to you. Next, let's talk about assessing for a variety of styles and weights, right? So if you're kind of new to typesetting, then you might not have experience using typefaces that have multiple weights. You've probably mostly set type in like regular, bold, or italic. However, most professionally designed typefaces are going to have multiple weights. I shouldn't have stopped sharing my screen. So now let's look at some examples of some weights, right? So like, go back, Open Sans. Yeah, so Open Sans, right? This is all different typeface weights, right? So way more than kind of your standard. We're talking like probably 10 or 12. So a lot of times you'll see these referred to by name, right? You see like light, regular, medium, semi-bold, bold, extra bold. But you can see also there's numbers here, right? Extra bold 800, 700, right? Those are referring to your weights. You'll really see them often ranging from like 100 to about 900, and they move in increments of 100, right? So yeah, 300, 400, 500, whatever. When you specify the font weight in your CSS file, you can always use either the name or the number, right? The name usually includes in the number, you could just write like weight 500. You always want to choose a typeface like this one that's going to offer you a lot of variety. At the very least, you're going to want a few different weights with lots of strong, noticeable contrast between them. And you want an italic version available for every weight. That is one that people often overlook. They're like, oh, I don't think I'll need the italics, but you do. You need the italics more than you think. Especially, right, so like when we're doing things like including titles of books or television shows or any of that you might underline in standard like print. That's the grammatically correct way to handle titles in print, but on the web we don't underline because it looks like a link, right? So anytime you are setting titles or any of that on the web or in a software application, it needs to be italicized. You need to make sure you have an italic version for every single weight. And when you're choosing your primary typeface, you want as much variety as possible, because that will give you plenty of options for setting all sorts of different type styles for your body text, your callouts, headers, subheaders, quotes, footnotes, like captions. There's so much stuff that you're going to want to do like just a little bit differently to set it apart from each other so that it doesn't all look like body text. But you also want to maintain that sense of like visual consistency across all of it, because they're all in the same style. So if you're using Google Fonts, which is my favorite, that's what I recommend, that's what I've got up here, then you can see at a glance, right, when you search, you can see how much variety Typeface has by looking at the style, like the styles here in the top right corner, right? So you can see Roboto 12 styles, Poppins 18, Lato 10, whereas something like this, Fuzzy Bubbles, it just has 2. And so you're going to be a little bit more naturally limited here, right? You want something that ideally has more styles than you need. You don't want to feel like stuck. Because the other thing is, you don't have to use all of them. You don't have to import all of them. I feel like that's another thing people kind of are concerned about, is the idea of like the package weight, you know, and like the load times and stuff. But just because Roboto has 12 doesn't mean you need to use all of them, right? You can select just a few. See these like buttons, right? So I can be like, I want light and light italic, and I want bold and bold italic, right? And I can just import those styles. And if I get to a point later in my design, or when I'm adding a new page to my website, or I'm adding a new feature to my application, it's like, oh gosh, what I really need is like, you know, black and black italic. I can go back and add these later, but I don't have to import them all to begin with. It's just nice to know that they are there, so that I have that kind of flexibility and I have that like adaptability while I'm working, you know. Whereas if I were to have chosen something, you know, that has just those 2 styles, that's all I got. I got a regular and I got a bold. I got no italics, I got no light. There's like, I'm so stuck here, right? And like, yeah, so this one does have a pretty good glyph set, but this kind of section up here, this is what you want to be looking at when you are testing, right? You want to be typing things here, give it an idea. You want to be trying all the different styles to see how they look. You want to be trying different colors. You want to be trying all of that to see how it adapts, and you want to evaluate that glyph set, right? When I was talking about internationalization earlier, definitely want to be checking that out. You want to be checking numbers. Yeah, so like we've got some fractions here, but just a limited number. And we want to be checking punctuation. That's the other really big one. So yeah, there's some limited punctuation here, not like a ton. Whereas if we were to go to something like, I would bet Open Sans or Notice Sans and compare, clicked on a bunch of things. Right. I would bet the glyph set of Open Sans is huge. Right, yeah. Look at how many like additional categories there are here. Just fully. So much more in terms of punctuation. And we've got these kind of additional marks, which is nice. So when you're looking at kind of completeness of a typeface, this is where you want to be in this bar right here, checking out the typeface itself, testing it here with some of the things that you know you're going to need to do with it in your design, and then evaluating the glyph set. So, right, styles. The other thing that I wanted to call out, right, is that while we were looking at this list, right, you see that some of these have their list of like 6 styles, 10 styles, 18 styles, and some of them just say variable, right? Variable typefaces are pretty new, and they're incredibly cool. They are really, really excellent when we write into them and have a chance to use them. So rather than moving in those kind of set increments of weight and style, the way that we kind of talked about when we were looking at that list of like, you know, whatever, 500, 400, 300, right? Variable fonts will give full control over that to the designer and the developer. So let me see. I'm trying to find. There's a great thing that Google Fonts does that lets you kind of play with variable typefaces. I'm not finding. Yeah. So here you can kind of see that like here's that range we were talking about, and here are all those kind of set increments that were previously the case. Variable fonts will let you just like set wherever you kind of want it to be. Here's a good example of a variable font, right? So this one is super adjustable. Not all of them will be quite as flexible as these, where it's going to have all of these on sliders. Most often you'll see the weight on the slider. Sorry, there's a little bit of lag as I'm streaming. And my thing must not be wide enough because I keep bumping the like responsive edge of this. But yeah, you'll see that as I pull, maybe, this is widening, thickening as I go. So it's not moving in that like, you know, incremental way. It's literally changing as I slide it. Right, size has always kind of been that way. But this one also has it for tracking, for, well, there's only one thing, so it's hard to see the leading, and for the slant. Sorry, this is being crazy, crazy laggy as I stream. So all of this is kind of moving on kind of a variable slider as opposed to being preset styles. That's going to be incredibly nice when you are designing, right? Because a lot of times you do end up in that situation where it's like, well, the 500 weight feels too light, but the 600 weight feels a little too heavy, right? You could set a variable font to that, like, you know, 550 width, or even something random, 543, whatever you want. You can really get as granular as you like. This is also incredibly nice, as you probably saw while I was kind of sliding this, the idea of like animations. So this one's maybe a little bit clunky because most of my bandwidth is being used to stream, but there's some really cool stuff that you can do with animating these kinds of variable typefaces because it's not, you know, chunk, chunk, chunk. it's this smooth progression that includes everything in between. So you can create some animations that look just really smooth, really, really sleek. And there are a bunch of these that are available in Google Fonts, right? So you can, as always, use the kind of preset styles. Even if you're using a variable font, you'll be able to say like, light, medium, extra bold, whatever, if you want to use the words. But when they are marked as variable, it means that you can also, you need to check how many things it's variable on. Most often, again, that is referring to the width. But you can put in whatever value you need, or you can do animations based on that value. All of that's going to be it's just going to add such a nice level of control to your designs that when you can use them, it's awesome to be able to. So I often now will kind of bias my search towards variables. I was going to say if there's a way. Here we go. Show only variable fonts. I knew there was a way to do it here and I couldn't remember. So I like to bias my search towards only variable fonts now because I really prefer the experience that offers as both a designer and a developer. A few folks saying hey in the chat. Hey Aztec. Hey Napalm. Welcome back. Thank you for jumping on. We're just kind of hanging out this morning. So for any of y'all that missed the kind of announcement at the beginning, we were going to have a guest this morning and unfortunately he's feeling unwell. So you got me. I'm just kind of winging it this morning, yik-yakking about assessing a typeface and choosing how to put one in your project. Oh, thank you. Napalm says, listen to your .NET Rocks. This is a podcast the other day. Good stuff. Thank you very much. I was very, first off, honored to be asked to be on there. And also, I was a little nervous because I'm not a .NET person. So I was like, they emailed me and I was like, are you sure? are you 100% sure? And they were like the nicest guys. Oh my God. I had such a blast talking to them. So, yeah, that one, we got the chance to talk about kind of design, talk about design and the importance of design and design developer communication and all the stuff that honestly is I've been ranting on for a year now. So it was fantastic. Yeah, a bucket list thing for me to be invited. It really was it was fantastic. It was something that I had never thought would be an option, and then when it happened, I was like, me? Really? Oh, it came as soon as my stand-up ended. Picked up the Humble Bundle on design yesterday. Ooh. I feel like you often send me links to Humble Bundles, Ashton, and I'm trying to... Did you send me that one? Because now I'm curious. I guess I could just Google it. Let's go see what Humble Bundle Aztec is looking at. Yeah. Design is important. It is. You're correct. Yeah, I'm literally off to Humble Bundle right now. I've got to figure this out. We're going to take a peek. They have so many now, which always I remember when Humble Bundle was one bundle at a time. And so now that it's there's always 20 million game bundles and 20 million whatever bundles. Books probably, I'm guessing. Or is it software? Ooh, it must be this. Yeah. UX UI design for real people. Nice. But this looks really good. My my worst trait is downloading these kinds of bundles and then never reading all of them. I got a fantastic bundle years ago now that had a bunch of the O'Reilly books in it, and they all look fantastic. Have I read all of them? No. Have I read one of them? Maybe. Yeah. Thanks for spending my money. Yep. Yeah, I hoard the stuff, Udemy courses. I'm the same way. Oh, my bookmarks are a nightmare. It do be that way. This looks really good. And you get it's not even like a tiered bundle. I feel like a lot of times it's like, pay $5, you get this, pay $10, you get that. But you just get the whole heckin' bundle if you pay at least $18. Oh, okay, they do have it split. So you could pay just $1 and get some of this stuff, which does look good. But of course, like, that's the one that I would want, right? The type rules looks really good. Like, I don't have 20 million books on typography literally on my physical shelf, and yet here I am ready to buy another one. Yeah, they've got one on game design too, which is nice. Yeah, I've been like fully distracted now. Just the software bundle. Oh, this all looks good. Damn. Why did I shouldn't have opened this. I should have stayed on Google Fonts where I belonged. Working on building a VR virtual library. Oh, that's gonna be really cool, man. I want to hear about that project as you work on it. That sounds fantastic. I have done like so little in the VR space, but I'm so curious about it. We've got the Kendo library, I think, for Unity. And so that's like as close as I have gotten to that world. No, it's not for Unity. What is it for? No. Oh well, we're not gonna look it up. I'm gonna embarrass myself. We have a library for it. It's clearly not my specialty. Oh man. Okay. But we were talking about assessing a typeface. I'm gonna go back to that, but please continue to distract me, because that's the part I love most about coming on, is just chatting with y'all. But in the meantime, the other, like, really the last kind of thing that I want to mention when you are kind of going through that practical assessment of which typeface do I need, right, is the idea of cost and licensing. So I want to start by saying that it is generally pretty rare now to be in a situation where you need to buy a typeface, especially as a beginner, right? So between like the default system fonts that come on your computer with your operating system and the incredible variety that's available to you here via Google Fonts, you should pretty much be able to start and frankly complete your design journey without really worrying about this too much. However, this is just part of their reality of working with typefaces, so I don't want to skip over it entirely. Font licensing will most often happen when you are doing work for a company that has chosen to use a very specific commercial font as part of their brand identity. And ideally, right, like, they will have already sorted this out for you. You know, they will tell you everything that you need to know about the license that they have and how much they pay, right? And you won't have to worry about it too much. I was trying to come up with like an example of a paid font. I believe the Donny is one. Yeah, my fonts, right, is probably going to be one of the places where you often see, right? So you'll see stuff like this, licensing options, right? And you'll notice that there are several. So just having a license for a typeface does not necessarily mean that you can use it everywhere. So you have to kind of be aware of what the different licensing means and what licenses you actually have, right? Because sometimes the names can be a little bit misleading. So something like desktop, right? They'll just say like, oh, you have a desktop license. That doesn't mean you can use it on everything that runs on desktop, or right, you can use it for desktop software. It means you have permission to install it on your personal desktop and use it for like design software, right? Clicked on something. Don't know what. Yeah, so you can use it in Photoshop and InDesign, whatever. That doesn't mean you have like free reign to use it in anything that runs on a desktop. Right? Similarly, like web font and app licensing is different. So just because you have the license to use it on your website does not necessarily mean if you have like an iPhone app, then you have the license for that. Those are going to be separate. But yeah, so kind of in a general way, you're going to need a separate license for digital use versus print. So if your client or you have only ever used a font for print publishing specifically, you might not have those licenses that you need in order to just like use the font as a developer or a designer, right? You'll need that desktop license that is going to give you permission to install the font on your own computer so that it can be used in design software. And then you might possibly also need a website or an app license as well, depending on what you are building. So, right, as we talked about, there are several kinds of web fonts, mobile, EPUB, server licenses. All of those are going to apply to different parts of screen, app, and print-based type usage. So again, one license does not cover all. If you have a website, an iPhone app, and a book, and you want them all to look visually similar, you need several different licenses to kind of handle that, right? So like an ad license is different than a web license, is different than a mobile app license, right? Like it's all gonna vary. So you need to make sure that you've kind of read, it's not even really like fine print, it's just the regular print. You just gotta make sure you've read the regular print before you just use a paid font kind of willy-nilly, honestly. The other thing you need to be aware of is seats in a font license, right? So if you are on a fairly large team, then you should know that most of these licensing agreements are going to limit the number of people who can share this asset as creators. So again, just because you have a license does not mean that it's necessarily okay to just kind of hand it around, like pass it through the team. It's important to check what that license specifies and add extra seats to it if you need. So most of the time, right, like when I take a look at what it looks like, right? So a lot of these you can see are kind of broken into like price-based categories. And some of them seem, right, like pretty cheap. You just need to kind of be aware of what you are actually paying for, right? So again, like this has it broken down by styles, right? So each of these kind of weights and styles that we were looking at in Google Fonts, they've got these priced at like whatever, $9. They've got all the various licenses, which you might need to buy something like this, right? Multiple times if you need multiple different licenses. You can see when we open it up, here's what we're talking about in terms of seats. So, right, like adding more seats is gonna bring it up. Once I start checking more of these different kind of things, right? So if I have an app and a website and I need to pay, I have a team of whatever, 8 designers, all of a sudden I've racked up a pretty hefty bill. And again, that's not to say that it's not worth it, right? Because, right, like these licenses that we've looked at are paid ones. So if this is something that is going to be an important like cornerstone of your brand identity, then that's really not that bad, right? Like it's not a subscription model in this case. Again, that kind of changes depending on other licenses that you may or may not need. But if this is just something that you're going to pay once as part of your like branding startup costs, you could do worse. And again, like we kind of talked about, you get what you pay for. So with something like this, you're going to get a lot more styles, you're going to get a lot more flexibility, you're going to get, right, like all of this kind of stuff, right? All of these languages that are going to be supported out of the box, ligatures, kerning, fractions, like how many different weights. And you don't need to worry about a lot of that kind of stuff that we were talking about earlier in terms of like, does this have all the punctuation that I need? Does this have all the weights that I need? Does this have all the languages that I need? You're going to get a lot of that kind of out of the box when you're willing to pay something, right? And again, it kind of comes down to that same trade-off that we talk about with like, right, open source, anything, dependencies, libraries, software, right? Almost always there's a point in like, either your career or your project where it makes sense to start thinking about changing to a paid model. And that is almost never right when you're starting, you know? Like if you are a startup or you're just creating something for fun, or you're designing something, your own personal portfolio page, frankly, no need to worry about this. In fact, I would say don't. There are really great fonts on Google Fonts that you can get completely for free and not worry about this. However, if you are starting your own business, you know, or you're several years into a successful business and you're looking at a rebrand and you want something that is going to look visually different and it's going to be specific to your brand, you know, and it's not going to necessarily look like everything else, look like you downloaded something for free and slapped it into your logo. These kinds of fonts are really, really great, you know, because you're paying for a designer's expertise and time and thoroughness. You're paying for all the different ways in which it's been tested. And you're going to encounter less of those kind of bugs or limitations or times when it's like, oh, I really wish this had XYZ and it just doesn't, and you're kind of stuck, right? So again, like everything, it's wonderful that we have free options and it's wonderful that we have paid options. And it's great to be able to support a typeface designer who has created something awesome. However, I don't think you need to do it right when you're starting. So that's my rant on that. Thank you for listening. I'll get off my soapbox now. Spindle's in the chat. Hey there, welcome. I am doing well. How are you? We've been just kind of chit-chatting. I'm actually just about at the end of what I had briefly outlined to talk about today. So I'm kind of wrapping things up, frankly. But yeah, we were, for folks that have just joined, we were meant to have a guest today, Carl, who is a super great designer over at Moneybox team. He woke up feeling ill this morning, so we're rescheduling that, and I kind of hopped on without a whole bunch of a plan to talk about assessing typeface. So with a brief interlude to talk about a really cool design bundle on Humble Bundle and some other stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much what I got. Holler if you've got any questions or any other cool design stuff that you've seen recently on the web, or just anything you should talk about briefly, because we got, well, I don't know, maybe like 10 minutes left in my my window for Dev by Design, but I'm also not afraid to hang up a little early. But hopefully y'all have a really good day today too. I always I like that I stream. For me, it's morning. It's like early-ish. It's like almost 11 for me on Monday. But I like streaming on a Monday because it feels like this chance to like check in, like hang out with y'all straight. Ooh, good question. Is this going to be posted anywhere? I was only able to half pay attention and want to go back and watch it. Yes. Every single one of our streams on the Code It Live channel get posted to the Kendo UI YouTube channel. I will go ahead and share that real quick. So yeah, you can always see over here, right? All of our stuff gets added to the, I believe it's like Kendo UI TV. No, Kendo UI channel. I lied, it's Kendo UI channel. But yeah, if you just search Kendo UI YouTube, you will find us. And then you can go through, again, just whatever recent uploads, and you'll find all of our VODs. Because yeah, I agree. It's nice. I like jumping in and hanging out on a stream. But I feel like I almost never catch it at the very beginning. You got it. So, yeah, and I think they show up on Twitch, like, very briefly afterwards. I'm gonna, like, create an endless loop here accidentally while I check. I'm gonna try and pause it, like, right away. So that you don't have to watch me watching me. But yeah, I feel like they show up, like, down here or something for a little bit. Somewhere. Maybe I have to not be streaming for it to show up. But I do think they show up here for like a day or two, and then they get moved over to the YouTube channel. So either way, you can absolutely find us afterwards. You don't have to be here at the very beginning for anyone who's new or joining. But on that note, I do think I'm going to wrap things up for today. So y'all.